Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Obeisances unto the Supreme Being Vasudeva, who is everything there is. Janmadyasya yato anvayaditaratascha artheshu abhignaswarat tene brahmahridaya adikavaye muhyanti yatsurayah tejo vari mridam yatha vinimayo yatra trisargo mrisha dhamna swena sada nirastakuhakam satyam param dhimahi. We meditate upon the transcendent Supreme Being from whom springs forth this universe. He is present in all that exists and yet distinct from everything. He is fully conscious and totally independent. He revealed to Brahma the import of Vedic wisdom. The material creation of three gunas appears in him as though real, like water in a mirage. Being eternally self effulgent, he is ever free of the illusory energy Maya. We meditate upon him, the Supreme Being. Nigamakalpataror galitam phalam shukamukad amrutadrava sanyutam pibata bhagavatam rasam alayam muhuraho rasika bhuvi bhavukaha. O devotees who relish a taste for the divine love, Bhagavatam is the fully ripened fruit of the wish-yielding tree of Vedic wisdom, flowing as nectar from the mouth of Shuka Brahmarishi. Go on drinking this nectar again and again, day after day. So now we are in the ninth chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, where we are going toward how eventually Parikshit takes this vow to fast unto death and sits on the banks of Ganga to listen to the narration of Bhagavatam by Shuka Brahmarishi. So we saw how after the war was over, Yudhishthira was coronated, and as Krishna was about to leave, Parikshit's mother was facing a great danger to her life, and Krishna protected her and thereby protected Parikshit in her womb. And therefore, Kunti offered beautiful, heart melting prayers to Krishna, which was all covered in the last chapter. And then again, when Krishna was about to leave, Yudhishthira, now the king, detains him because of his own remorse at what he thinks to be the cause of all the destruction that made him the king. And he was consoled by the sages along with Krishna himself that everything happens as ordained. And this was taught in the Gita too, that you are simply an instrument and I make everything happen, is what Krishna teaches. And yet Yudhishthira, who is so wedded to righteousness and to goodness, among the three gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas, sattva, the mood of goodness, is still, while it is superior to tamas and rajas, sattva itself can be binding, and Yudhishthira is somewhat bound by this sattva guna, with this mood of, or this quality of goodness, which prevents him from seeing that everything happens as ordained, and he is filled with remorse and sadness because of this overwhelming feeling of what he thinks to be a wrong set of events that have happened. So Krishna agrees to stay on because there is an inner purpose why Krishna stays on, which is what this chapter is about. So Yudhishthira decides that in order to get rid of his guilt, he needs to pay a visit to Bhishma. So this is a thought that Yudhishthira gets, but it is ordained by Krishna that he get this thought because Bhishma is lying in the battlefield and he needs to be blessed before he leaves the body, and Krishna wants to personally be physically present as Bhishma leaves the body, and in order to bestow that blessing indirectly, he agrees to Yudhishthira's request to stay on. And also, as ordained, Yudhishthira gets this thought of going to visit Bhishma. So now the quick background here is Bhishma fought on the other side due to circumstances, but he loves the Pandavas and Yudhishthira dearly. and most importantly, he is a beloved devotee of Krishna who is always uh, surrendered to Krishna and who always treats Krishna with great devotion. And yet he was forced to fight on the other side, and he fell down in the battle eventually. But the battle happened toward the end of what is called as Dakshinayana, the great war of Mahabharata. And normally, Dakshinayana, which is when the sun moves in the southerly direction, is considered an inauspicious time to leave the body. And Uttarayana, or when the sun moves in the northern direction, is considered an auspicious time to leave the body. And this change in direction from from Dakshinayana to Uttarayana, that is to say, from the sun going in the southerly direction to the northerly direction, happens uh, in the Gregorian calendar. It happens in the middle of January, which is even now marked as Shankaranti. And the war itself happened in, according to Gregorian calendar, sometime toward end of November, early December. This has been actually beautifully dated based on astronomical and other references to again prove that this is itihasa, that is, the word literally means as it happened. So while there is a lot of symbolic meaning from the events of Mahabharata, and so with Ramayana, spiritual significance and inner symbolism, but they also literally are historical events, and this has been fairly well established through rigorous research. So the timing is well established, and therefore Bhishma, who fell in the battle, wanted to wait for this period of a month or a little more than a month, during which all these events we saw happened. Yudhishthira getting coronated as a king, and uh, Parikshit being protected in the womb and all that. And now the moment has come when the Uttarayana is going to come imminently, and Bhishma is going to be ready to leave the body. So, knowing this, Krishna agrees to stay on, and by Krishna's will, Yudhishthira gets this thought of going to pay a visit to Bhishma in the battlefield. So everybody goes. They're all now in their chariots. They are all well decked up. These are grand chariots because now they are the undisputed rulers. So Yudhishthira and his brothers Bhima and others, and then Krishna himself, along with Arjuna in a chariot, they all go to the battlefield where Bhishma is lying down on the ground, and they all get down from the chariots and offer their obeisance to him. Krishna also offers his obeisance to him because, after all, in the way they are appeared, Krishna is much younger to Bhishma, and therefore Krishna, always following the right protocol, offers his obeisance to him. But Bhishma, of course, recognizes who Krishna is, and he pays homage to Krishna when he makes this visit, and he also treats the Pandavas dearly. And when this meeting is happening, it is said that so many sages also make a visit there because this is such an auspicious time. Bhishma is such a um, great grand um, father figure of the entire clan, and a man who lived wisely, and it's a life well lived in wisdom and devotion, and he is now finally going to leave this body. So it's a very auspicious time, a very special time. So many sages come, sages such as Narada himself, and Bharadvaja, and Vyasa, and Vishwamitra, and Shuka Brahmarishi also, because Shuka Brahmarishi is the son of Vyasa. These events, as we know, are happening right after the Mahabharata war, and Vyasa is present and Shuka Brahmarishi is with him. And as we saw earlier, the instructions of Narada to compose Bhagavatam to Vyasa, and then Vyasa teaching Shuka Brahmarishi, these happen a little bit later, after the war is over, and after some time when Vyasa feels that frustration. That's when those instructions happen, and Bhagavatam is composed and taught to Shukabra Maharishi. But before all that, this is in the immediate aftermath of the war, and Shukabra Maharishi is with Vyasa as a young boy, and they all pay a visit to Bhishma, who is there, And Bhishma is now filled with tears looking at all of them, and he addresses Pandavas especially. He says, first of all, he feels so much sadness at what Pandavas have gone through, because while now they are the undisputed rulers after this grand or great war, they went through so many calamities before. We saw Kunti refer to it. They were poisoned, they were tried to be burned, they were attacked by many demons, they were thrown into forests. Through gambling, their kingdom was stolen, and Draupadi faced humiliation. So many calamities were faced, and they had to go through all this to eventually now become the righteous or the rightful rulers. So Bhishma says Yudhishthira is Dharma personified, righteousness personified. Bhima is the greatest warrior. Arjuna is the greatest archer. And above all, Krishna himself is your dear friend. But look at the irony. Despite all this, you had to go through so many adversities, so many challenges. And therefore, he says, we have to recognize that Krishna's will as time is inscrutable. So Krishna refers to this in the Bhagavad Gita itself. He says, Kalosmi aham. He says, I am time that destroys all. So, this is the bewildering nature of the Supreme Being. Krishna especially appears in such a pleasing form. He is literally called Shyama Sundar, the personification of beauty. And yet, he also reveals his gory, terrible form to Arjuna, which makes Arjuna tremble with fear when he shows that he is time itself that devours all creatures. So, that's why Bhishma says, nobody can understand the will of Krishna, who is standing right here. He is uh, your well wisher, your friend, and yet, as time, he has caused so many things to happen. And of course, the inner meaning of this was revealed to us by Kunti when she said all these calamities were ways for Krishna to bestow his grace on Pandavas so that they would turn to him and thereby deepen their devotion. And that's how it is for many across centuries. We have seen this over and over, where various calamities and suffering comes to devotees, which in turn deepens their faith and deepens their abidance in the truth, and turn away from the impermanent world. So that's the inner meaning, but that's what Bhishma refers to here and says his will is inscrutable and we can never understand it. But anyway, now you are the sole monarch, and your duty it is to protect the subjects of your kingdom now. And then he says something very beautiful. He says, never forget who is standing here is the supreme being. He says Krishna is God Himself. He is the prime person, Narayana. Simply with his own Maya, he is roaming around like a human among Vrishnis. Vrishnis is the clan in which Krishna was born. So he says, the verse is so beautiful. Yeshavai Bhagavan Sakshad Adyo Narayana Puman Mohayan Mayaya Lokam Gudascharati Vrishnishu. He says, Yeshavai Bhagavan Sakshat. He is verily the Supreme Lord, Narayana Puman, Narayana himself. But Mohayan Maya, by his own Maya, he is deluding the world by roaming around like an ordinary human being. And then he says, he lists three beings as only those who know the secret of Krishna. And it's very interesting. He says only Lord Shiva, Narada, and Lord Kapila know the hidden glory of Krishna. So we already saw Narada's story, and Shiva is, of course, the supreme being himself, a manifestation of the Supreme Being, and therefore Shiva is always aware of everything. And then Lord Kapila, who is an avatar of Krishna too, whose teachings will come in great detail later. So he lists these three: Shiva, Narada, and Kapila know the hidden glory of Krishna, who you are thinking that he is your cousin, your friend, and he became your charioteer, your counselor, and all of that. But his hidden truth, never forget that He is the Supreme Being. He is the soul of the universe who looks upon everyone equally, and he has no sense of otherness, no sense of diversity. He sees only one. Everything there is simply his projection. It's all happening in him, of him, by him. Therefore, he is all there is. And yet look at his compassion. He is out of his great compassion, he has appeared. So Bhishma knows exactly why Krishna has appeared. And even though Yudhishthira thinks he has come there to get some wisdom from Bhishma, and he has brought Krishna along, the real secret Bhishma knows, and he says, look at Krishna. He has appeared out of his great compassion to bless me in this very hour when I'm ready to leave the body. And then he says, any yogi who casts off his body with his thought fixed on Krishna, chanting his name, is rid of all hankerings and is released from all bondage. So, this is the secret. Krishna says this in the Bhagavad Gita too. He says, one who thinks of me as he leaves the body, he is never going to come back into this world of suffering. He is ever free. It's a very famous verse, as many verses are. And here, Bhishma repeats the same thing. He says, one who thinks of Krishna, who chants his name, and who fixes his thought on Krishna as he leaves the body, will be always free. And look, he has come at this hour for me. So then he says, may that Lord, who is adorable for even all the deities, all the devas, that is to say, all the various powers of nature and their presiding deities, may so they are everything, all of nature adores him, because they are all having their sustenance in this one truth, which is the supreme being. And so he says, may that Lord, who is possessed of four arms, because he is known to possess four arms, Chaturbhuja is the name in this as Narayana. He says, and who has got such gracious smile. So he describes now Krishna very intimately, beautifully. He says, who's got gracious smiles, whose eyes are red, and who appears to anyone in their meditation, and yet who is here as a person with such charming smiles and red eyes and beautiful countenance. May him, he says, stay on till I leave this body. So, this is the prayer he offers to Krishna. And of course, Krishna has come exactly for that reason. Now, having heard this, Yudhishthira now goes Yudhishthira is there, and we can again see how Yudhishthira is always primarily focused with the questions of right and wrong, with Dharma. So, after listening to this beautiful exposition of who Krishna is, Yudhishthira goes right back to asking Bhishma about what is the right Dharma. He says, tell me what is the right Dharma for or the right course of conduct for a king and for uh, all other kinds of positions. So Bhishma indulges him, and he gives a detailed lecture on dharma. He talks about the dharma based on the innate disposition of men, on based on one's particular mental tendencies, one stage of life, and all the other aspects. And he also talks about the duties of men, of women, and the four ends of human pursuit, which are called as dharma, artha, kama, moksha. That is, what is righteousness, what is the right wealth to be acquired, what is the place for sense enjoyment, and then finally the final goal of liberation. So, and the means to attain them. He describes all of these very beautifully and thoroughly. And then, after all this, when Bhishma is finishing his discourse on dharma, the literally that is the day when Uttarayana is happening, and so that is the exact muhurta, as it is said in Sanskrit, the exact time when the sun literally shifts course to go to a northerly direction. So Yudhishthira, as he is asking these questions and he's getting these responses, this particular event happens, and Bhishma notices it, and then he immediately becomes silent. So the other little thing that happens before this, which is not recounted in Bhagavatam, is that Yudhishthira eventually, after all these questions about Dharma, asks what is the highest Dharma, because all these dharmas are relative, as a man, a woman, a king, and all the rest. And then when he asks what is the highest Dharma, Yudhishthira chants the 1,000 names of Krishna. He says chanting these names is the highest Dharma, and with their meaning, that is to say, this is called the famous Vishnu Sahasranama. So this is the entire Vishnu Sahasranama is narrated by Bhishma to Yudhishthira right in this particular moment. And after this, Bhishma withdraws and he focuses his speech and exclusively fixes his mind on Krishna. And he says, he sees Krishna there with this beautiful yellow robes, and he is seeing Krishna with 4 arms. So even though Krishna is there as a human being, as a Vrishni, to his vision, to Bhishma's vision, Krishna appears as Narayana right there with yellow robes and 4 arms and this all the paraphernalia that makes him appear like Sakshat, as they say, verily Narayana. And by seeing this, and he concentrates his vision and his thought and his everything on this vision of Krishna, and his pain vanishes. It's easy to forget in all this that he's been lying down in great pain for a long time, because was actually hit with so many arrows, and he's a great warrior, but he's still having a lot of pain. But at this moment, as this vision is uh, bestowed on Bhishma, all his pain goes away, and whatever little any attachment he had, any worldly thought he had, everything is gone. And he now beautifully glorifies and prays to Krishna, who is referred to here as Janardana. Janardana is another beautiful name of Krishna, which means literally one who ends birth. So that's actually a beautiful meaning. That's the inner meaning of this word, uh, because what it implies is he, as we've seen many times before, he bestows liberation. He ends the cycle of birth and death. So this particular word, inner meaning of this is he ends the cycle of birth and death, is what Janardana means. So now Bhishma narrates this beautiful prayer as his last prayer before he goes, and he says, now on the eve of my departure, I offer my mind, which is free from all thirst for worldly enjoyment, to the Supreme Lord Krishna. He says, uh, here is Krishna, he is retaining his blissful character, while his own Maya is what is making this entire creation flow. Then he says a few lines of such beautiful prayer. Every line he says, may I cherish motiveless love for Krishna, who is friend of Arjuna and who has assumed this very charming personality clad in these beautiful robes, and he is looking brilliant like the sun and with curly locks. May I have motiveless love for this Krishna. May my mind, body, and soul rest in Krishna, whose hair is soiled with dust by the hoofs of the horses. So he's remembering Krishna in the battlefield now, how all the horses are running around and there is so much dust, and that has made the hair of Krishna look like color of ash, and he's got perspiration, and his skin is pierced with my arrows. See, Bhishma, as we saw, was unfortunately fighting against Arjuna, and Krishna was in the way. So some of the arrows of Bhishma in fact fell on Krishna. So he says, I had this unfortunate position where my arrows pierced him, and with my arrows pierced, and with his hair the color of ash, and his beautiful curly locks flowing, this Krishna who is in my mind's eye, because this is the last time when he was directly engaged with Krishna in the battle. So he recounts that vision again, and he says, may my mind, body and soul rest in this vision of Krishna. May I develop love for Krishna, who drove Arjuna in the middle of the battlefield and gave the wonderful advice of Bhagavad Gita to remove the delusion of his friend. And also, he says, this is a beautiful thing that Bhishma narrates here. He says, "He may I have motiveless love for Krishna, who broke his own vow in order to keep my word." And this refers to this beautiful incident in Mahabharat war where Bhishma is, as we saw, fighting on the other side, but Duryodhan, who's the general of the or the head of the army, he doubts Bhishma. He says, "You are not fully engaged in this battle, even though you are doing your duty by fighting on my side. You are really dear to Arjuna, and therefore you are not unleashing your full power. You are a great warrior, but you are just you're just not exhibiting your full power and potency." So he is basically encouraging Bhishma to give his all, and Bhishma does reply to him because it's his duty to be as good a fighter as he can be, regardless of the situation. So he makes a vow to Duryodhana. He says, "Tomorrow in the battle, I will fight with such ferocity against Arjuna. You will not see this ever again, and this ferocity will be so intense that Krishna will actually take weapon against me." So this is what he promises. Now Krishna, on the other hand, has made a promise in the beginning of the battle itself that he'll be a charioteer for Arjuna. He will just drive the chariot, but he will not take weapons. This is the condition upon which Krishna agreed to be the charioteer of Arjuna. And so everybody knows this, that Krishna will not, because if Krishna takes his weapon, then the whole war will be over in no time, because his Sudarshana Chakra can defeat everything in no time. But Krishna took this vow that he will not take arms in the battle, and everybody knows this. So Bhishma now makes this great promise that I will literally make Krishna break his promise and take weapons, seeing the ferocity with which I fight. So the next day, Bhishma keeps his word and fights with so much ferocity. Arjuna is just flooded with arrows. He has not seen Bhishma fight with this intensity. And when this happens, Krishna knows what he has promised, of course. And Krishna has to now either keep his word and not take weapons, or keep Bhishma's word and break his vow and take the weapon. And of course, Krishna, as we saw, his name is Bhakta Vatsala. Devotees are more dear to him than himself. So he breaks his word and keeps Bhishma's word by picking up a wheel, a broken wheel that is lying on the battlefield. He picks it up and he goes towards Bhishma to attack him with that wheel. And Bhishma sees this, and literally he goes down on his knees because he is moved to see to see his dear Lord Krishna taking a weapon to come against him. So instead of, so now he says, this is the best way for me to go. So he goes down on his knees, and then Arjuna actually comes and intervenes and pleads with Krishna to say, Krishna, I will fight the battle. Please put down this wheel and just do be the charioteer. And then Krishna agrees. But so all he did was a pastime, of course, to just do enough to break or to keep the word of Bhishma by as if picking a weapon to kill Bhishma, while of course not carrying through with it, and then letting the battle resume. So this whole pastime was done simply to keep the word of Bhishma. And Bhishma here recounts that, and he says, here is Krishna who broke his own vow to fulfill my vow, and took a chariot wheel towards me. And I see this vision of him coming, and may my mind dwell on this vision with motiveless love. And he sees he then says, also he remembers Krishna with his, with blood actually, because he was hit with arrows and there was blood on his body and his upper garment was flying away. And so this vision of how Krishna was in the battle, being surrounded by all this commotion and dust and even arrows hitting him. So, this vision of Krishna he sees and he says, may this Krishna always remain in my mind. And then he also says, all the people who died in this war were all, because they saw Krishna as they were dying, they were all granted liberation. So that's the great fortune of all the people who died in this war. And he says, having had the, also he then refers to the gopis. He says, all the gopis of Vrindavan, they had the honor of dancing with him, playing with him, seeing him smile and glance at them, and so on. And they were imitating him. So, such is the beauty of his uh, engagements or his dealings with his dear devotees. So, he is so sweet and so dear to the gopis of Vrindavan, and yet he also was so fearsome in the battlefield. And may this Krishna, who also helped Yudhishthira perform Rajasuya sacrifice, which is a great sacrifice in order for Yudhishthira to be established as the great emperor, and thereby helping Yudhishthira reign over the kingdom. So he is recounting all that Krishna has done in such sweetness, and he says, every line he says, may my mind dwell on this Krishna, may my mind, in Sanskrit it says, Partha Sake Ratir Mama Astu. Bhavatu me Bhagavan Gatir Mukundaha. He says, may my mind rest in the dear friend of Arjuna, who is Krishna. May my mind rest in Bhagavan, who is Mukunda, the one who gives liberation to all. So every verse he says, he recounts the various activities that Krishna has exhibited, various pastimes, and he says he sees that in his mind's eye, and he glorifies Krishna who is standing right there, and he says, may my mind rest in you. May my heart have motiveless love for you, who has done all these wonderful things. And now, finally, the moment has arrived, and he says, having shaken off any idea of diversity, of any individual separateness, now I've realized that the unborn supreme being that you are is also in the heart of every creature. And even though like the sun appears different to different people, there is only one sun. Similarly, he says, you are the same self of all beings. Even though there appears to be diversity, it's only an illusion. All there is only you. And I see only you in everyone and everything. And with this vision of oneness, it says, Sutta Maharishi narrates that Bhishma peacefully took his last breath and merged his soul with Krishna alone in his mind, word, vision, and thought. It says, Krishna evam bhagavati manovag drishti vritti bihi. In his mind, speech, vision, and thought, only Krishna being there, antashwasa uparamat. He says, the last breath, Bhishma let it go and he merged with the supreme truth of the only truth of all there is, which is called as Brahman, which is standing there personified as Krishna. So, seeing that Bhishma has merged into the one supreme truth, everyone fell silent there. It's a beautiful scene we can envision. There is so many sages, there are all the Pandavas, and there is Krishna himself standing, and this pious, beautiful soul, after narrating or after glorifying in such beautiful prayers, leaves the body at the right time, in the right way, in the presence of Krishna, and everybody is silent. There is complete silence there. Sutta says, just as birds keep quiet at the end of the day, all the people there, all the sages, everyone is completely silent. There is silence there, honoring the great passing of this great being. And then there is a shower from the heavens to celebrate the dear son leaving, and Yudhishthira performs the funeral rites after that, and then they all go back to the capital, which is Hastinapura, and then Yudhishthira now resumes his role as the king, as the emperor. And now, after all this, Krishna is going to finally depart to go to Dwaraka, which we will see in the next chapter. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.